Confusion about gender and sexuality is being sown into the hearts of this generation. No part of our world is untouched by this confusion as it is impacting our communities, schools, families, and even churches. This confusion spreads from the preschools in our neighborhoods to the highest court in the land, and its darkness has come to rest all across the globe. But God has not left us without hope. He has not left us without answers. In the midst of this darkness, God has spoken, and His word shines with clarity. In confusing times, our confidence must be in our all-sufficient God, who has provided us with an all-sufficient word. Join us at Brookes Bible College for the 2025 Soul Care Conference on gender and sexuality.
Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget to continue telling your friends about us. We appreciate your support. That said, I'm excited. We have a returning guest, but the last time we had you here, it was like, and nobody could understand what it was saying because we had some technology issues. So I am so thankful that you took time out again to swing by here and have a conversation. So thank you. I've got my good friend Bob here today. So
it's a pleasure being here, Josh.
yeah. So we met. I'll start with that because it's kind of fun how we met, actually, because I'd seen you before at the gym.
Yeah.
But I didn't put it all together. I think the first time was it at the
Dennis's birthday party.
Dennis's birthday party. Okay, yeah. So we have a mutual friend, Dennis, had a birthday party, and you and Dennis have been friends forever and a day.
We have.
And so we started talking, and winds up, at that time I think I just started working with Jeremy at the time, right? So
shortly after that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and so Dennis has a son named Jeremy who just got married.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, if you're listening in, congratulations again. You get a shout out on the podcast. So
yeah.
But a special time. And so I've spent the last couple years doing some one-on-one discipleship with Jeremy. But along the way, I keep seeing you at the gym, and we had other events that kind of came along, and I've had a chance to get to know you and know your heart. And then I started hearing your story, and I was like, this is so awesome. I really wanted to. I was so disappointed that when we got you in here last time that they couldn't hear your story because it's such an amazing story. So I'm going to ask you to kind of walk me through it again because it, to me, is such a powerful story of God's work in the life of couples and in the life of individuals. And I can say this as somebody who's in ministry, I tell people all the time, you can never say no getting back with your spouse. I've had a lot of people saying, well, I'm divorced. That person, they're a complete monster. I would never go back to that situation. I go, but if God changed your life, would you go back to that? And quite honestly, I've seen some pretty interesting stories over time. Your story isn't the only one I know of that. It's just rare, but when it happens, I think it's an incredible story of how God can work if people will allow Him space to do so. So, with that said, I don't want to give the story away. We just had Tom in here, and we were talking. You grew up in Belleville, right?
Belleville, Illinois, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your childhood and kind of walk us through that again. You grew up in Belleville. What were your parents like? And what kind of, let's kind of maybe walk through that, and you can maybe fill in the gaps a little bit of your wife too.
Yeah, I'll do that. Let me take liberty here for just a moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since this is a double take, and this is called Triple Play,
Absolutely.
maybe you'll have me back for a third time.
But
as a double take, what I thought I'd start with is this. And I think it's really profound because after our last discussion, somebody asked me, knowing your story, would you do anything different? Do you want anything different for your life? And the answer is no. So I'll start with that. We'll talk about my story, and then maybe you'll understand. But God's hand is written all over my life. So yes, I grew up in Belleville, Illinois. graduated from Belleville Township High School West in 1973. My wife actually graduated in 71, so yes, I married a woman, and so much wiser to have done that.
I married an older woman by about like 5 months, so
There
she
you
was
go.
a great level ahead because she beat the cutoff. I was behind the cutoff. So, right? Like she graduated 1 year before me.
Absolutely. And so I grew up in pretty dysfunctional family. You know, dysfunction is characterized by a lot of different things, but fast glance, my mom and dad were both children of alcoholics. They were both physically, sexually abused. So you can only imagine their backgrounds. And as my sister and I grew up, a lot of the dysfunction of not only my family, but my extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and all of that came into play in our lives. And it was also pretty much a repeat for Deb. So her family um, had a lot of difficulties, a lot of divorce, just, a lot of dysfunction, and she has abuse in her background. So we met would be late 72, and through the process of meeting, I fell in love with immediately. It was like love at first sight. Well, what was not to love? She was this cute little 5-foot Italian, and she was in a bikini, so the whole man thing got a hold of me. And that was it. I knew I wanted to marry this woman, and as I got to know her, it just confirmed it even more.
Hmm.
And we got closer and closer to one another, and uh, then as circumstances would be, I was still in high school when I met her. She had already graduated, an older woman, and I had enlisted in the Navy, so I ended up going into the Navy for a very short stint, only to find out that when I got out, she had not necessarily wanted to wait for me. But it was fortunate that I got out when I did, through really unusual circumstances, yeah, honorable discharge and all of that. But I got out. We married in November of 1973. So it was 51 years ago. And we were married for about 5 years. And it was the worst 5 years. Because of our backgrounds, we brought in a lot of baggage from families of origin, from our pasts, our own difficulties dealing with abuse and sexual abuse on her part. Then, at the end of those 5 years, I basically had just had it. There was a lot of infidelity on her part. Just couldn't take it anymore. I loved her desperately, breaking my heart.
Wow. So, wow. So 5 years in, you've already got infidelity and you've got a heartbroken and divorce has now come. And how many times have you heard that story?
It unfortunately is a plague society.
It is. Hold on here.
Yep.
Want to make sure we get a good copy this time. I don't want anything to disrupt a
All
good
right.
story, but so so that I can't imagine. So what is that? I mean, that builds up. You guys don't have kids yet, right now?
Yes, we have children.
No, at that point
Oh, no, no,
in
at
the
that point,
story.
no,
No,
no.
at that point in the story, you're so no kids are in the picture. It's just
No,
you and her,
fortunately, yes, it was just us.
just a mess.
Yes.
What do you think led to a lot of that?
Well, I think when you look at our pasts and backgrounds, my parents had been divorced, remarried. I'd had a couple of stepfathers, um, and Deb, the same thing. Multiple marriages in her parents' backgrounds. She was abused by somebody in her own family. Um, when you have that kind of life, what becomes normal is really not, right? And so when you bring that into a new relationship, you want to start over. You have this mindset, oh, I don't want to grow up like my parents. I don't want to be like them or anything like that. But you still do. And unless you have others in your life really help you unpack those bags and that past, those hurts and pains and the emotions that go with it, you're bringing that into a new relationship. You can't help but do it. It's part of your personality at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just curious, were you traveling a lot? Were you at home a lot? I mean, when she's being, when infidelity is going on, a lot of times that's contributed to because you're away from home. Were you away from home a lot, or was it
No,
just
no, my work didn't take me away from home. I was home all the time. So I was very consistent. Um, but what I'll tell you is for her, because of the abuse in her past, because of all that had gone on previously for her, she would explain it. I was looking for love in all the wrong places.
Mm.
She knew she loved me, but it just wasn't enough. There was a void. There was something missing inside of her that she couldn't find. She was looking for it.
well, and the world tells you to find it in other relationships. If you don't find it in the one you're in, then go find it quickly in another one and follow your passions, right? So
Absolutely.
and so
Absolutely.
it seems when you listen to the world's philosophy that that would be a natural philosophy, right? Which is
Right.
why the world's rampant full of divorced, hurt, broken people and families.
Right. And understand, neither of us were believers at that time, right? We were both, although we both kind of grew up in Christian homes, they knew who God was, knew who Jesus was, went to church, went to Christmas services, all of those kinds of things. But we weren't walking as Christ followers. We weren't born again, as the Bible teaches us. And until that happens, that void is being filled by whatever else can fill it. It's not being filled by Jesus, right? It's not being filled by the Holy Spirit. And so the bad stuff comes in, and some of that bad stuff culminated in outside relationships to our marriage. For me, what filled my void was actually Deb. And that, uh, of all things, I didn't even really realize until much later that I had made her my God.
Mm.
So, if she's my God and she's doing these bad things, how messed up is that? My thinking was off, her thinking was off. But we didn't have anybody to come alongside us and say, "Hey, you need to consider these things. You need to look at God. You need to look at Jesus and what's available through Him to heal from all of this."
Yeah. So so you guys get divorced. What happens next?
Yeah. So divorce was an interesting break for us. We were at the time living um, in Champaign Urbana. We had moved up there to get away from family, to get away from problems, which was kind of our MO. Have a problem, move, get away, run away from it, which it only follows you. So when we divorced, we moved out from one another. We continued to communicate. We continued to stay in touch. And I finally had said, I've had enough. My sister and brother in law were down in Georgia. And I said, I'm moving to Atlanta and to get away.
So
And
your sister, physical sister, or was this her sister?
no, no, this is my sister and brother in law.
Okay.
And so they were in Atlanta at the time. And that seemed like it would be a good opportunity for me to get away from Deb, get away from my problems, and to just move to a new area and start life over. So I moved to Atlanta, and it wasn't, I don't think, 2 months. Deb called and said, I need to get out of here. She was still in Champaign. And she wanted to know if she could come down, move in with me for a short period of time, and until she had an opportunity to find a job and find a place. Still loved her. The problem was I still loved her.
Right.
And I said yes. And she moved in with me. She was in the apartment that was the Christmas right before 80. And uh, she moved in with me. We kind of fell back into bad patterns. And I said, look, I'm going back up to Belleville for Christmas. When I get back, I don't want you. During that Christmas break where I left, I didn't know, I found out later, was that she essentially became suicidal.
Mm.
In that process, there was some neighbors across the hall from my apartment who somehow or another intervened. I don't know the whole story. She knows it. eh, But they actually um, got with her and they led her to Christ. So not only did she not take her life, she actually got a new life, was born again. And when I came back from Belleville, she was gone. The apartment was empty. All traces of her were gone. I didn't know what had happened. And we didn't talk for a little while. And then slowly we started talking. And so I had a little bit of communication with her. I understood where she was and what she was doing and kind of kept tabs on her. Well, the interesting thing for me, though, was there had been no change like that in my life.
Right, right. So now you're starting to see her have a change.
Well, I hadn't yet.
Okay.
So, God's got a sense of humor. I said this in our original meeting, but so as it would be, of course, my wife's name is Debbie. And as it would be, the first three women that I met as a single man were all named Debbie.
What are the odds, right?
Yeah, right, right. And so I told you at the beginning of this, I wouldn't do anything different. You kind of getting a taste of what I'm talking about. It's like God's hand is written all over our life, every single inch of the way. And so after the third Debbie, I just said, oh, I give up. So that was over a course of about a year and a half or so. And then just a little bit before 1981, Deb and I started communicating a little bit more. And we uh, seemed to kind of like fall back into this pattern of really spending more time on the phone together, being together. And it's almost like we were starting dating all over again. That's when I started noticing the change.
Mm.
And that change was, I didn't trust it. Let's just put it. I could feel the change. I could see the change, but I didn't trust change because I couldn't trust the other person, right? And so over the course of the next 6 months into 81, um, I really started getting really confused. I knew I wanted to be with her, but I wasn't sure I could be. And finally, one day she came to my apartment and we sat on the couch and I said, I don't know what's different about you, but there is something different and I can't put my hands on it. What is it? That's when she explained to me that what happened in that apartment just during that Christmas break, that this couple, the Colquitts, had led her relationship with Jesus, and that she had not taken her, actually found a new life. And she started to explain to me how she was a new person, that she had come to be very confident in this new relationship with Christ, and that she and this group, this Bible group, she had been praying and praying and praying for our reconciliation, for us to remarry. But caveat was she said, "But I'm okay. Don't remarry if it's not something we end up doing. I'm okay us being s- He's the first man in my life who's completely filled me." That really threw me off.
Mm.
And so I kind of chewed on those words for a little bit. She left. It was a couple weeks later, after really thinking about that. Excuse me.
No problem.
Um, After thinking about that for a couple weeks, I called her back and I said, "Hey, can you come back?" And she did, sat on that same sofa. And I looked at her and said, "I need what you have." I was totally at the end of myself, so exhausted and trying to fill that void inside of me with the right thing, just her. And she prayed with me, received Christ that day. And have one. We remarried in November of 19.
Wow. So how many years you been married?
Well, according to her, we're coming up on 48. According to me, we're coming up on 51. I don't count the 3 years we were apart as really divorce. I think it was God's interlude for us.
Mm.
Um, but whatever, well, a long time we've been together, and the story doesn't stop just with the goes so much further.
Well, definitely. I want to continue, but I also wanted to just say for those who maybe you're listening in and you have had this kind of experience. Maybe you're not a Christian or your spouse is not a Christian. Maybe you've gotten divorced and you're like, God can't do anything in that space. Don't discount God. Don't discount him. He's working where you don't know. He always is. And you got to trust the process to him. And I liked how you said my wife had said to me, "I'm okay either way."
Yes.
And being that just tells me that's somebody who's satisfied in Christ. Christ alone. I met my wife when I finally said, I'm done dating. I'm just gonna work on my relationship with God. I got into a point where I was like, yeah, seems like all these girls are younger than me. I'm not in college anymore. I'm just, God, if I'm single, I guess that's what I'll be. And if you bring the right person around, I don't want to date anymore. I don't want to. I'm tired of that. I want I want you and whatever you have for me, and I'll be satisfied in that. And it was, 6, 8 months later that I met my wife. The young man we were talking about earlier, Jeremy,
Yeah.
it's kind of a similar story. He kind of was finally like, "You know what? I'm just not gonna be as aggressive as I've been, and I'll just continue working on Christ and work on that relationship and be satisfied in there." And
It's the song, "In Christ Alone."
mm, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's where he wants us.
absolutely. So you guys get remarried. When do you guys obviously come back to the St. Louis area? When does that happen?
Well, so we were in Georgia, and we stayed down there actually for 10 years. So we were down there for quite a while. The first 6 months of our second marriage was great. It was good. It was better than it had been originally, but it wasn't what it needed to be. About 6 months into it, although we weren't repeating a lot of the same bad stuff, it just didn't feel like I had it all together. It was more me and how our relationship was going. So I woke up one morning, was eating my breakfast cereal and reading the Word. And there's a verse in Proverbs out of chapter 16 that says that a wise man seeks the counsel of many. I read that and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I walked into the bedroom to pray with her like I did every morning before I left for work. And at the end of the prayer, I said, "Hey, I just want you to know to go to counseling. I need. And she didn't say anything. So I go find a counselor. I go to this person, and the third time I'm getting ready to go back to the counseling, she comes to me and says, "I'm with you." That began a full year of counseling that she and I went through. An incredible woman. And she was a Christian counselor who just had such amazing insights to each of us. She worked on each of us individually for the first 6 months, although we were in the session together. It was really working on my past and Deb's past. Once we got all of the luggage unpacked and it was all on the table, then she began working on us together. Spent another 6 months, and it was the hardest year of my life, and it was the best year. And at the end of our sessions, right before the last session, Annette said something. She said, you guys have come an amazing distance to this point, and I think you're in a really good place. But if you want, there's one more thing. If you kind of want to go even a little bit further, we can call this our last session, but if you want to, kind of find out a couple of other little things, come on back one more time. But it's your choice. Well, we left there. We got in a car. We looked at each other, and we both said it almost at the same time. I'm going back. Right? It was like almost like being baited.
Yeah.
And we went back the next week, and when we got there, the very first words out of Lynette's mouth was, "I'm really happy that you came back because what that tells me is want more, want a full and robust marriage. You want to keep working on being the best you can possibly." And the verse that God gave us at that time is John 10:10, and it was specifically, Jesus said, the verse before it says that the thief comes to rob, steal, destroy, but I came that you might have life, have it. Um, and we know that's what marriage is, right? The thief comes in, he wants to destroy families, he wants to destroy marriages, he wants to destroy you. But Jesus came, we might know an abundance that doesn't exist without him. My God, it's our story.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting choked up. But I mean, that is our story, is to get to that point where you recognize and realize what we have in Christ that we don't have on our own. That void that is in me is over. It was just so full of Jesus. So we took that wise counsel. We've employed that in our life ever since. So has God.
And that morphed here in St. Louis. You have been doing premarital counseling for some time now, right?
We have. So when we started going to First Free, we got with some other couples, and we actually started a ministry called Rebuilders. And Rebuilders was for couples who were having critical problems in their relationship. It was more of a group type of mentoring, counseling type environment. And I can remember our first session, we had 20 couples who signed up. Yeah. And
But that's such an important, I mean, again, marriage, it's a real struggle in real life. Everybody falls in love. And then the truth is, vast majority of them will say every one of them get divorced or have a miserable marriage.
right, there's no difference between Christian couples and non-Christian couples. It's almost the same. More than half. It's an easy out. It's an easy solution. And I get it. I've been there. And so we use this example in our mentoring now, and we did with rebuilder couples, and we do now in the premarital. With couples who are having really difficult relationships, the very first question we would ask them is this: what's your relationship? They always said the same thing. It's pretty non-existent. There's an example that we use. It's the isosceles triangle. Three sides the same. You're on one point, spouse is on the other point, God is on the top point. When you're as far away from each other as you possibly, you're as far away from God as you could possibly be as well. But even if you can't work what's going on between your spouse, simply work on a relationship with God. Picture in your mind what happens as you move up side of that isosceles triangle. What happens? You move closer to who? God
And your spouse.
and to each other, right? So it's amazing how God brings granularity into those relationships, brings humility into those relationships, takes out our selfishness that perhaps caused us to be that separated in the beginning.
Hmm.
And it's a great example of what we share with our couples. And I just I can't think of anything else to say to that.
No, it's funny how you use that triangle analogy, because I have a good friend of mine, Dr. Joseph Brasher, who wrote a book recently for his own marriage ministry in his church, but put it out on Amazon and for others to use. And I just read it, and it used the same example and
Mm.
and unpack some of that. And you know, what I would say is when you're hearing 2 and 3 and 4 people use the same example, there's probably some that are all trusted sources that have, marriages that you wanna emulate, and they're saying, "Hey, this is how God used it in my life to draw us to each other and to Him." That's something to weigh in on. It's kinda like I tell people, when Jesus or something in the Bible is repeated, God's not unintentional, He's intentional.
Right.
He's trying to get your attention with it.
Well, and it's a great litmus test on a daily basis for both Deb and I, right? Is if I'm at odds with her today, why is that? What's going on? What's my relationship? Am I right with God? Am I in the right place first? Is it her or is it me?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So how did it morph from doing builders, or rebuilders
Mhm.
to the premarital counseling? Because you brought that up, but I know there was a little bit of amorphous there too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, right, working with couples that broken and having difficulty, it can be exhausting. It really can be. And then one day we just kind of woke up and said, what if we get ahead of the game here? What if the home run isn't working on it after it's broke, but working on it before it's broke? And the more we talked, the more we realized, man, if we had had that, got married the first time, what was the potential for our success to have stayed married? And so we took the rebuilders mentoring processes and we rewrote it into a premarital mentoring process. We began to use some tools, some assessments. Prepare and Enrich is another organization who does something very similar. And they use an assessment that each of our couples complete the assessment, and we look at that as kind of a pre-course
right.
qualifier. And yeah, so now we have this huge opportunity to work with couples before they're getting married in the relationship, head of the marriage, to prepare them for lifelong commitment.
I love that. I just love that. You know, um, what are you finding success in the premarital side? Let me ask you that. How have you seen that? Because you've been doing it now a while. How is it playing out compared to the rebuilders?
We've to date, mentored over 45 couples, and it's not just us. We actually have a team of folks who have been trained on how to do this. So we come alongside couples. It's a two-on-two relationship. So Deb and I will mentor one other couple at a time. And let's let's put it this way. You asked, what's our success? None of our couples have gotten a divorce.
That's I think there's a lot to be said. There was interestingly enough, I read a stat recently that, and my wife pointed it out to me. Actually, I should give my wife Amy credit on this one. She pointed out a stat to me. She's like, at first I thought she said marriage counseling. I said marriage counseling, and she goes, no, premarital counseling. Couples that have premarital counseling have like almost like an 80 or 90% more chance of having a successful marriage than those that don't. It was caveated with those who have had a biblical, consistent premarital counseling. So not like a one-time session, but that kind of idea where they've been working through a process over a period of time prior to marriage, have
Yep.
found there's been a huge success rate in marriages within the church.
Yeah, I want to interject the importance of that. You said the word counseling, and we're not counselors. We are broken couples who have come through a process that God has shown us, and we're coming alongside a young couple as not counselors, but mentors, right? We're actually going through all of the curriculum that we go through in a way that isn't just like giving them wise counsel, it's actually going through it with them. And our process actually begins, um, and it's like 10 weeks that we spend with them going through the curriculum, doing the assessments, talking about ourselves in the midst of all of it. But then for a year after they marry, we're still with them. So we follow up with them continually. We get with them for dinners. We're available to them if they're having issues or they have concerns or they just want to talk, whatever the case may be. So for at least a year, we're still coming alongside them, available to them. At the end of the year, it's up to them if they want to continue the relationship or they're okay. But we're going to haunt them for at least the first year. And it's been amazing. If you come to our house and you look at our refrigerator, it is nothing but plastered with pictures of all of our couples. And many of them have come back. I can remember one night, one of our first couples that we ever mentored was about a year after they had gotten married, really having a tough time. And they said, "Can we come over?" They got there at like 6 o'clock. They left at 3 a.m. And they had one of the best arguments in front of us that any couple could ever have. They weren't at, let's just put it this way, they were really having issues, and we had the opportunity to sit there with them, and while they argued, we would just interject some questions like, "Well, why are you saying that? And what are you feeling right now?" And, things like that, and at 3 a.m., they got up and said, "This has been great." We said, "Yeah, right, it's great. I gotta get up in 2 hours to go to work." But it was a great evening, and that couple just had their 4th child,
That's so
and
awesome.
I get to sit in the pew at church next to them, and that's what mentoring is like. That is the blessing in all of this, and it's not even us. It's not Deb and I. It's just the life God chose or that we ended up going through that God blessed, that He's allowed us to be blessed by using us this way. There's another verse. It says that we're supposed to just be vessels, emptied out, prepared for every good work. And that's kind of how we approach the ministry. All we can do is be totally honest, totally transparent with these couples about our own life and all our own mistakes and all the challenges that we've gone through, what we've learned. And then just kind of transfuse that into them as we go through these 10 weeks and listen to them respond to things like financial intimacy, communication. It, there's 10 different areas that we really delve deep down into. And there's a lot of questions that we ask, a sharing. We
Mm.
go through.
I That's awesome. I have a heart for marriage myself. I've been married now 24 years, and I always tell people I'm actually more in love with my wife today than I was 24 years ago, and that's
Amen. Yeah.
hard to fathom.
Yeah. I have
But
more to hold against her, but I still love her.
I just, I just find that, like, as I get older, I just even appreciate some of the quirks because I know them
Yeah.
and nobody else knows them.
Yeah.
I know how she's going to respond to certain things before she even does it, but I love it
Yeah.
because I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. Nobody else knows that.
And then she knows you twice as well.
Exactly. No, she puts up with me,
Right. Right.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, and all my quirkiness and all my craziness and busyness,
Yeah.
she still loves me. And
Yeah. It's the hardest job I've ever had, by the way. I've had many positions in corporations and small business. I've held executive positions. But of all the jobs, and I don't want to really call it a job, but you know what I mean by that.
yeah,
Of all my jobs, of all my responsibilities, being married is the hardest one. It's the one that deserves my best, my all. I'm all in when it comes to marriage with Deb. And that takes a lot of work. And making sure that she's on the front burner of my oven, everything else takes a back. That's a daily choice.
yeah, it really is. Lay down you take up your cross,
Abs-
lay it all down and pick it all up
Yep. Yep.
every day.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
20, Luke 9:27.
right. Well, and his mercies are new every day.
Yes.
So you don't have to wake up with all the burdens of yesterday. You can start new today with God. Today is the first day. Could be the first day of the rest of your life.
Right. Right. I would tell you that probably the most critical thing I would have for couples, um, if you ask me that question.
Uh,
I don't know why
well,
we were even thinking about it.
I was actually gonna kind of wrap things up and say, what's one piece of advice you give the couples if there's one thing that really stuck out that they should, do or cling to or complete.
That's a great question, Josh. Sounds like a triple play to me. Yeah, so the one thing is communication. In my business life, I told my teams, look, 80% of any problem is the communication or the lack of 20% is the actual issue. So if you can get the communication right, if you can first seek to understand and then listen closely to that other person and then pursue being understood, and you work that well, then you'll probably overcome most of the issues and problems you really have. And those problems will probably be diminished. They won't be as big as they seem. But what I find is that most couples aren't communicating well. They're having difficulties. They're broken. They're selfish. Philippians 2:3-4 says, think more highly of others than you do yourself. And I think in a marriage, that means think more highly of your spouse than you yourself. So through humility, love, transparency, and honesty, communicate, communicate, communicate.
That's definitely key. And make intentional space to do that.
Yes.
Yeah, you won't do it if you just say I'm going to do it in my brain, but you got to make space. Like you have to create times where you and your spouse are going to not be on your phones and you're going to communicate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
if you're not
wise.
if you're not only intentional in your brain but intentional in your actions, deed and how you map things out. I tell people we prioritize all the time. So you just need to figure out where's that priority and where's it going to be and how's it going to do and then don't compromise.
Absolutely.
Don't compromise. It's easy to do. Is just say these are non-negotiables. Like we talked about the gym earlier. I go to the gym every day. That's a non-compromise. I'm going to find my way to the gym, even if it's a short period of time, 6 days a week. Do a little cardio. If I can't lift, that's fine. But I've got to get in there and get moving because I know it has effect both in my mental, my decompression of things. I'm a better person. I'm better health-wise. There's so many benefits to it that it's just an area that I'm unwilling to compromise.
Right.
In that same vein, my spiritual life is just as important. My time with God every day, uncompromised. If I'm not eating and drinking from the Word of God every day and spending time praying to Him, then what is He to me? And then my spouse too. If I want to show her love, I have to prioritize time and give her time, time, right? And so I'm going to set time aside where she has my attention each night to decompress her day, and she gives me time to decompress mine. Usually I've had to become a better listener and not trying to fix all the problems, though that's a natural thing for a guy, I think, to do. We want to fix problems. Early on in my marriage, I learned that she often wants me to listen and not fix it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
are you listening to me? I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm telling you, I'm just trying to relate a problem. Well, no. If you just manage this situation this way, you tell this person that, you tell this person that, you can take care of this whole. You're not listening. I want you to listen to my problem.
You've seen the YouTube video, The Nail?
Yes.
Yeah, look at that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, just let me take the nail. No, it's not about the nail. Yes, it is. Yeah, you got to go look that up if you haven't
Yes.
seen it lately.
Yeah. You know what? Because you showed it. You were the one last conversation you brought it up, and I went and looked it up. I think, but yes, that is it. Like you gotta, but you gotta be intentional and put those listening ears and give that respect to your spouse.
Second piece of advice. And
Yeah.
you didn't ask for it, unless you want to stop and ask, and then I can.
What's
say
the
it.
second piece of advice you give,
That's
Bob?
a really good question, Josh. Is find another Christian man you really respect, has a strong relationship with God, and start walking with him. If you're trying to do this alone, you need help. You need another good man. I have probably four men in my life right now who, if it weren't for them, sometimes I wonder if I'd still be married, because they have really helped me sharpen my game. And she knows it. She knows when I'm walking strong in God. God love her. That it has made all the difference in my life. Men like Dennis
Yeah.
and others who tell me I'm wrong when I'm wrong.
No, we were just talking about the one-on-one discipleship with Jeremy, and it's the same principle. Like, we all need somebody that we're discipling and somebody that is discipling us,
Absolutely.
And that sharpens us, keeps us accountable. The greatest of men. I mean, David was a great man after God's own heart, but can you imagine if he had some accountability, some people who were Nathan before Nathan came after the problem, who he could speak with and we could help him catch those flaws before he performed.
Yep.
And hindsight's 20/20, but it's even better if you got people helping watch your back and help you keep you pointed towards Christ at all times. And so, it's usually when we get away from that accountability, those discipleship moments that we struggle more. So, well, I think that's a good place to land, don't you?
I do.
All right. Well, let's land there. All right. And we'll get you back here. We got more to talk about, Bob. We can dive into marriage so much. So it's a passion of mine. So
I'm always available.
I know you are. I can't wait to have you. And I'm sure we got lots more stories to dig into too. So that's it though. Hey, thanks for listening in on our second take of this interview.
Yes.
And we hope that this one goes through really well and you enjoyed and are blessed by it, because I've been blessed every time I'm with you, Bob. I'm so blessed. So thank you so much for being here today.
Such an honor.
And thank you guys for listening in. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. All right. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Triple Play. Don't forget, as always, to like and subscribe and share. Get the word out. We appreciate that. Also, don't forget to support those that support us, like Resource One and Andy McCallum's team. If you have any financial planning needs, give those guys a call, 636-458-1798, no matter where you're at in life. If you're going through divorces, we've had episodes on here. They've got people who can help you prepare for that. If you're retiring, they got people who happen help you for that. And if you're young, you're just trying to get started, trying to figure out what's the best first step, they've got people for that. So consider Resource One, Andy McCallum and his team there, 636-458-1798. Also, Chris with CS Design, they do our intro or outro. They do the logos. They're wizards at graphic design. They're wizards with all things, I call it technology related or social media related. Give those guys a call. Chris is great. 573-436-3717. And lastly, don't forget, if you have any insurance needs, give Jeff Earhart at 314-821-5333 a call. And those guys would be glad to help you at State Farm with your insurance needs. So State Farm, Jeff Earhart's agency, 314-821-5333, or Jeff. And we appreciate your support as always, and we'll catch you next episode.
You're safe.